Welcome. You are all welcome. We're very excited about this panel. We are very grateful to have 4 Carnegie Fellows here with us today to present some of their research. The topic is called Sustainable African Futures, Climate Change, Policy, and Innovation. We are also very grateful to have a fabulous discussant, Natasha Mwila, who will be giving comments after the papers. What we're going to do is have each of the presenters present in the order of the program and have about 15 minutes. And I will try to keep us on track. I confess to them that I sometimes get very interested in the papers and lose track of time, but I will do my best as chair. And then we will have comments from Natasha and then open it up to everyone for questions and comments and thoughts, and hopefully we'll have a great conversation. So first, I'd like to ask Anna Msigwa from the Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology to come and tell us a little bit about your research in the Kilimanjaro region. I think before, after, it's all good.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Msigwa from the Nelson Mandela African Institution of Science and Technology, not in South Africa, but in Tanzania, Arusha. I'm going to present my current research project, which was funded by the Carnegie, and is about developing a drought early warning system for Kilimanjaro in the collaboration with the community and also using technology. So just to give you a little bit background of agriculture situation in Tanzania, agriculture in Tanzania contributes about 30% of the national GDP. However, the productivity is very low due to occurrence of extreme weather events such as drought. This extreme weather event is, of course, due to climate change. And agriculture mostly, especially in the northern Tanzania, relies in the rain-fed agriculture. So what I mean by this is that they depend on the rainfall to do their agriculture productivity. And so there have been unpredictable rainfall and frequency of droughts due to climate change, which is threatening the food security and the livelihood of the Tanzanians. So as a country, Tanzania, we experience an estimated average annual loss of $200 million due to climate change impacts, so such as drought. And so we need to tools that will predict these rainfall events so that it can tell farmers when to plant. So this is all about my project that I developed a drought early warning system so that to inform the farmers and the stakeholders to facilitate proactive measures to mitigate drought impact. So in a nutshell, this system, we just tell the farmers when they should really plant, like, okay, when are they expecting drought? Maybe 21 days is going to be drought, so they should not prepare the farms, or it's going to rain, so they should prepare the farms. So our approach was mainly a bottom-up approach, whereby we started by identifying the needs of the farmers, setting up their priorities, what they really want, and also we developed the system and then test the system with the farmers, then ready for deployment. So why did we say that we did it with the collaboration of the farmers? So we set the priority of the farmers, so they wanted to have their own local language in the system. They help us with the forecast by telling us the time step that they want, the present seasons. So when is really raining, when is it really dry seasons. Although this, the seasons are changing, of course. Maybe you expected, like in Tanzania, most especially in northern Tanzania, we have 2 rainfall seasons. So we have long rains from March to June, and then we have short rains from October to December, to November. But this has been changing. So the technology now is when it comes out. So of course, they've told us that those seasons, but now that is when the technology comes to predict the outcome of the other season in another year. So we conducted a lot of stakeholders meeting, focus group discussions to get their views. So we did conduct focus group discussion by separating. We wanted to get the views of all the categories, the elderly, the youth, the women themselves, and the men. So we grouped them. So because if you just do it like one focus group discussion, most of the time, because of the culture, men are the one that will be speaking. So we try to group them, that the female will be alone, the youth will be alone, discussing their priorities, discussing what they really want, and we could see that they had different answers. So not only that it was about the system, but we also wanted to know the awareness of the climate change impact in their community, and they had different answers. So the system, we deployed it in a web. So it's just about empowering the farmers with accurate climate change insight. And we use remote sensing data together with station data. So we use remote sensing, meaning like satellite data that will give us images. So in an example of this, we use chirps, and it gives you image that will tell you the value of the rain in that place. And so we had also combination with our station data. So with the funding that I got, I installed 3 automatic weather stations at different area. These automatic stations, even if I open the website now, they give me real-time data. So now I'm able to even know, like Tanzania now is raining, how much is it raining using this station data. So these are also incorporated in the web, where it gives you real-time data, so it facilitates the prediction. So in terms of technology, of course, we use AI, and in AI, there's machine learning. So we used different machine learning models. We tested different machine learning models, and only the 2 machine learning models predicted accurately. And why 2? Because one is for spatial, meaning that space using image, and another one is just time series at a point. Okay, so results now. So we said, because we're using chirps, of course we tested only for Kilimanjaro, that I said. Kilimanjaro is in the northern part of Tanzania, somewhere there. So we said, let's zoom for the whole Tanzania. This is a map of Tanzania, how Tanzania behave in 1 month prediction or in 3-month prediction. So the blue color is when you see like it's more wet, like more rain. And when you see red, it's more drier. So in 1 month time scale, it's showing that in the area around Lake Victoria, around Lake Tanganyika, and also around Lake Nyasa, they are more wetter. But of course, when you go to 3 times steep, whereby this is more accurate for the farmers to know at least the amount of soil moisture inside their soil. So it is showing that it's more, a little bit moderate or going to dry. But this area of, this is in Mtwara region, showing that Lindi is showing that it's more drier compared to other area. But so when we zoom in, Kilimanjaro is showing that in 1 month's time step is just moderate, that the farmers can continue and do planting, and also in the 3 months. So that area is where I did installation of my automatic weather station. Why do we need installation of these weather stations? Because as you can see, the pixel for remote sensing, it shows like a big area. It has the same value, but in Tanzania is a very mountainous area. So because of the mountains, you can have different rainfall. So in just few kilometers, maybe 5 kilometers, here it can rain and another place it cannot rain. So in 5 kilometers of remote sensing, it can just show you that it's raining, which is not very accurate. So the weather stations help us to now separate that and incorporate the accurate results for the farmers specifically. So what are the lessons learned? The core designing of these early warning systems significantly improve the trust of the system and adaptation and the usage, because not only that I communicated with the farmers, I did with the policymakers. We have media coverage. So the policymakers, you know, they are the voice of the community, and so they help us to tell the farmers, like, okay, this is good. So if they accept it, they can emphasize it, the usage to the community. And so I had also a lot of meeting with the extension officers. That is the meeting that I had with the district, I did for the 2 districts, so the executive district officers, so they are in charge of everything for the district. And also the stakeholders' involvement plays the responsibility of me as a researcher to produce a reliable system, because we have not deployed it yet because it's in finalization. So because I did this testing in June, and so they have been calling me since then that when is the system ready. So of course we are not going to be only in the system, because we are also going to deploy it in a mobile application so that it can be easy to be used by them. So they've been calling me and wanting the system to be ready. So it plays a responsibility that, okay, I need to produce something reliable because these people are depending on it. And so, of course, for sustainability, because I will not be there all the time, I will go on with another project, of course. So if I leave to the extension officers, to them as a community, is more sustainable. So, for example, the weather stations that I've installed, I had to train them. So in my system, for example, currently I face error. So I had to just call them like, okay, I face this error. So they are responsible because it's their own. Some we have installed it in a primary school whereby the children are learning about so it's their own and not really my weather station. So that's the lesson learned, and that's all for me. I thank the Kaniji and also the FALIF project from the Future Africa University of Pretoria for the funding. Thank you so much for listening. He's presenting.
Yes. Are you going to use the same laptop? Yes. Okay. So next we'll invite Naeema, Ahmad, Ramadan, Hussein Kout to come up and share with us some research that they've been doing on recycled plastic-based assistive devices in South Africa. So.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I have a small flu, so my voice might not project as normal. Thanks for joining our session today, and thank you, Anna, for setting the tone. Today I'm presenting a study fairly new. It's fairly in the development stage, so it's a protocol that I'm presenting today on the development of recycled plastic-based assistive devices for people with disabilities in the South African context. Just a few notes in terms of this project. It's gained quite a lot of momentum. I had presented this at the National Young Researchers Pitch at the Green Youth Indaba in South Africa in July this year, and we won 4th place, and we've now been involved in a mentorship program to develop the project even further. We were also selected to present at the United Nations Youth Leadership Council, the YLC Climate Change Conference, which was in July this year and then postponed, so we're still going to present. And then this project has been registered with the WITS Innovation Center, which is essentially a new innovation hub of our university that is currently patenting the process, which is why I may disclose and not disclose some information today. And then we were also awarded the Horizons Platform Institute grant for interdisciplinary research, particularly based on this project. So why did we end up here? I'm a physiotherapist or physical therapist by profession. And in South Africa, the prevalence of disability is increasing. We're currently sitting at a prevalence of about 15%, and that's only the cases that have been accounted for. In our rural population, we don't have an estimation, even thumb-sucking. I can't give you a number, even as a clinician, seeing the struggle of people with disabilities. The burden of disability has significantly increased on our public health system that's already struggling, and we're at a very pivotal point now with the transition into national health insurance. It's the first time we will be implementing universal health care, and it's a chance for us to get in there while changes are being made and policies are being adapted. So one of the biggest challenges is access to healthcare in general, but along with this is the access to assistive devices for people with disabilities. So as I presented this project, I've started understanding and realizing when I say assistive device, everybody jumps to the idea of a wheelchair. It's anything that aids the mobility of a person who may have a temporary or short-term disability. So it can range from elbow crutches after an ankle fracture, you played a football game, you need some elbow crutches for a short time, a walking stick for an elderly person, a walking frame, up to a wheelchair. There's a huge range in terms of what we mean by assistive devices. But sort of the underpinning theory for our study is the Penchesky and Thomas theory of access, where we're trying to understand the intersectionality of affordability, accessibility, acceptability. There's so much that comes with access to healthcare, particularly in a resource-constrained environment like ours. So globally, again, the stats, we're not sure how accurate they are, but 7% of the global population actually need access to assistive devices. And of these, particularly in low resource areas, 20% do not access it. And I've seen it as a clinician, and it results in exclusion from society, a lack of reintegration into work, which has then socioeconomic implications as well. So we identified the research gap in terms of reduced accessibility and the inequality in terms of access to assistive devices if somebody eventually accesses the system. And so we had conducted 2 preempting studies, which actually form part of my master's and PhD research, where we had done a whole sort of policy investigation in terms of the implementation of our current policies related to disability and rehabilitation, as well as assistive devices. And one of the biggest things that came out was the lack of access because of the high cost of assistive devices, and also because of procurement issues. So why did I end up in the climate change panel? Well, we have 2 issues. One side, a lack of access. On the other side, a huge environmental problem in South Africa. We have a major plastic waste issue. We contribute to about 36.5% of just Southern African waste, it's not waste disposal, but we're still struggling, and the issues in terms of environmental implications, I think, are given. So that's where we're sitting now, and we thank AI for this. That's our Johannesburg skyline. So the link to plastic waste, I think anybody who might have applied for Carnegie or anything else might have been guided to say, make sure you link to the SDGs. And I think it's important that we keep coming back to tying it to a broader goal. That number 3 looks at good health and well-being. That's with the accessibility. But we're also looking at, it's an issue of equity and inequality, and it's a shift from equity to the justice perspective as well when we're talking about accessibility, and of course climate action, particularly because South Africa is such a huge contributor to plastic waste production. So I asked AI what this might look like, and AI was just as unsure as me, because as a physical therapist, I would not put a patient on any of these assistive devices. They look seriously unsafe. But this was the starting point to try and conceptualize what would this look like, how does it actually work, and can it be done? So an interesting thing that came up was, one of my first challenges was, well, has it been done before? Not in a Southern African context. It has only been done in the UK in the manufacturing of orthotic devices for people with amputations. So it can be done, but do we have the infrastructure to support it? Because they're able to produce it at a much lower cost because of the infrastructure that's already there. So we've been going about and exploring, but the significance is worth the effort of trying to figure if this can work or not. It's a sustainable solution. It's offering a low-cost alternative to the current assistive devices. We're looking at improved accessibility, and the benefit is we're collaborating with the National Health Insurance Office at the moment, so we have an influence in terms of changing the policies so that when we get to implementing our assistive devices, we can already, if the product is ready, we can exploit that and present it into the public health system. At the moment, the focus is short-term assistive devices because it's baby steps. We're looking at elbow crutches at the moment. We've been playing in the lab last week, actually, playing around with the 3D printers. We are only, at the moment, we have a team of engineers working with us as physical therapists. We are 2 physical therapists. And based on the feedback from the entire team, it's very multidisciplinary, is that we need to focus on short-term assistive devices for a few reasons. Number one, much easier to manufacture and play around with in terms of exploratory costs. Number two, if you look at the prescription of an elbow crutch, it's generally for a short-term period that it will be used. So 6 to 8 weeks is what you require for bone healing, and that's essentially the period that most people will use elbow crutches for. It can be after a fracture, an elderly patient with a hip replacement, sports, an athlete. A lot of our athletes are using it. And as silly as it sounds, we have seen patients get secondary complications from something as simple as an ankle fracture because it was a 25-year-old healthy soccer player, walked into the clinic, we didn't have crutches, went home without crutches, he weight bared on the fracture, which was not supposed to receive weight bearing, then resulted in a stress fracture higher up perhaps on the tibia, and then now we're dealing with a secondary fracture. Then they don't have the rehabilitation and they end up just not going to work, perhaps not returning to sport. Academics sometimes fall off, and so the cycle just continues. So the focus at the moment is just short-term assistive devices. If we get this right, we can start exploring long-term products. So really we want to understand the technical side, the mechanical ability, stress testing, etc. But I think what comes with technical studies is often we forget the qualitative side of things. I'm very much a qualitative researcher by nature, and we'd really want to understand the experiences of usage, the acceptability of it, because we're pushing the concept of accessibility, and what the benefit has been because of the 2 preempting studies. Those were purely qualitative. We had focus group discussions, we had semi-structured interviews. We conducted this with not only end users, which would be people with disabilities, but clinicians who are prescribing the assistive devices, management who actually procure the assistive devices, and especially senior management at the National Department of Health because of the way our structure is. So the methodology, again, I can disclose to some degree most of it, and most people will say, well, if you're planning on patenting, then why bother to even present the research in the first place? We're exploring, we really want feedback and input. Maybe somebody here says, wait, did you ever think of trying this? And something that came up recently when I presented was, what about exposure to microplastics if you eventually get this right? And that forced us to think then about silicone coatings. And so the more we present, the more insight we get in terms of improving what we actually produce in the end. So it's obviously going to be mixed methods. At the moment, we initially conducted a literature review just to scope what's there, and that's where we found smaller examples of where it's being done, particularly for prosthetic limbs. But the focus is really participatory action, and I think Anna showed that in terms of involvement of the farmers If we don't have buy-in, if there's no acceptability, there's no point to pursue the project. And when we go into, thank you, the technical viability and durability, there's a lot that we need to consider, but at the moment in the lab, we're playing around with the 3D printing. The engineers have suggested that we start with that. And when we came, we pushed the idea of, no, it must be recycled plastics. And they said, well, depending on our infrastructure, it might cost us even more. And so we're almost competing with a basic aluminium crutch. So if we look at it, it has 4 different types of materials: the rubber ferrule, the handle, the aluminium, etc. So we might get away with, in terms of assembly, if it's only plastic, we might get away with reducing the cost. So at the moment, we're playing with polymers, which are tiny little pellets that you put into the 3D printer, and that's what we're trying to test at the moment. It's the cheapest access we have at the moment. And then once we get this right, we're looking at exploring a collaboration with Polyco, which is a huge recycling-based plastic company in South Africa that recycles. So it's almost a social project where we want to say, let's help each other. We'll take your waste. You don't charge us. And that's something we're exploring at the moment. Again, we've got to explore the acceptance, and that would come from a lot of the qualitative studies that we would want to pursue further beyond this. And ethics, I think, will come in for anybody doing a study, particularly in health sciences. We're currently working on the application to our ethics committee, and it depends, again, on the prototype that we can plan which population we'd like to test this on. Beyond the study, we have a vision of creating hubs within each province of South Africa where it can almost become a part of a social entrepreneurship project, that the hubs start to develop it. If we manage, for example, with 3D printing, that we have the infrastructure to invest with a 3D printer, that these can be manufactured for the system in each province, and people with disabilities who are very capable of contributing can be a part of the production of the actual assistive devices. And then we would have to do a cost-benefit analysis, particularly against aluminium crutches at the moment. And so in summary, we're dealing with an issue of poor affordability, huge problem with plastic waste. How do we tie the two together? We want to provide a low-cost alternative and then improve accessibility and inclusivity, particularly in society. Thank you so much.
We have such a great combination of presenters and projects covering a lot of bases here. So now I want to invite up Levy Otwoma from the Kenyan Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. And so now we're going to learn a little bit about exploited reef fishes in Kenya and some research that you're doing.
Yes, so my name is Levy Otwoma. I'm a senior research scientist at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. So this was a project funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York as a postdoc, implemented together with the University of Pretoria. So basically what I did is try to quantify local extinction and shifting baseline in Kenya's exploited reef fishes. So what we know about reef fishes in Kenya is that they have been exploited for centuries. If we look back to history, this dates back to 8th century. So currently, based on government report, the coral reef fishery supports indirectly 1.5 million Kenyans at the coastal region. It also provides direct employment to 22,000 fishers along the Kenyan coastline, and then it contributes overall to 80% of marine fisheries production in Kenya. And then if we look at the economy, we produce approximately 24 metric tons. This translates to 0.064% of the GDP. But this fisheries is facing problems currently in Kenya. These problems are emanating from overpopulation that is occurring in Kenya. This is also linked to poverty and poor governance. So we are seeing a very pervasive overfishing that is going on in the reef fisheries. And what this has caused over the last 4 decades, there's been a drop in production from by 4-folds compared to what was fished in 1980s. Then the type of fish that are being caught currently are low-value fish in low trophic compared to the past. Then what has also been noted is that local extinction might be occurring because out of the several species that are in these fisheries, only 3 species account for almost 60% of the total catch. So what the risks with this is that we might be experiencing local extinction without noticing. So we need to understand the historical baseline so that we detect any declines and local extinction. Because this fisheries supports a lot of fishermen in Kenya, artisanal fishermen. So my project basically was to try to comparing historical baseline with modern fish assemblages to identify species that were threatened with local extinction in Kenya. And for this, we combined several data sets from archaeological data set that covered a period of 750 years from fish bones. Then we also had data from fishermen. These were fish catch data that covered 24 years. Then we had also ecological data set. This was obtained using UVC under visual sensors, and it covered also 24 years. Then after we had this combined data set, we wanted to now validate using local knowledge. These were interviews from fishermen that we did between 2022 and 2023, and this data also gave us shifting baseline in these fisheries. So the objective were basically to identify historical exploited reef fish that have undergone local extinction unexpectedly, and this was done at several temporal scales and spatial scales, and using, as I said, archaeological data set, fish catch data, ecological data that was obtained from underwater visual sensors, and local knowledge. So the local knowledge data was also disaggregated by age to try to identify and quantify shifting baseline amongst fishers in Kenya from their perception. Then once we got the finding, we tried to also raise awareness in the sites that we worked so that fishermen are aware about. So the study happened along the Kenyan coastline. It's approximately 600 kilometers, and the different colors is the different data set. Like the ecological data set is the green boxes that was obtained in 2 sites, one in the north and one in the south. So basically, we selected these sites because they ideally represent artisanal fishing in Kenya. They have high fishers density. They also have active fishing operation. Yeah, and how the data was collected, the archaeological data set, we didn't do it ourselves. We collected from 3 published studies that were done between 1993 and 2013. And as I said, this data was from 2 sites, and it covered a period of 750 years. And basically, they used zooarchaeological method by comparing modern fish skeleton that were deposited in National Museum in Kenya. Then the other data set, the catch assessment data set, we collected ourselves from 25 fishing landing sites. And also the ecological data set, we collected ourselves using the line belt transect method. Then the interviews that we did to validate the other data set, we did it ourselves. These were through semi-structured interviews. We conducted around 152 interviews with active fishers in 6 fishing communities, and we disaggregated this data by age to try to quantify shifting baseline. among the Kenyan fishers. So the findings, when we compared the data set from archaeology, catch data, and ecology data, we identified 23 species to be threatened with local extinction in Kenya. And what was key is that most of these species were from the family Serranidae, popularly known as groupers. And these species have the biology where they form spawning aggregation during spawning, so they become vulnerable to fishing. That's why most of the species that were identified were from this group. And then when we asked now fishermen about the 23 species, they were able to corroborate local extinction in 17 out of 23 species that we identified that were from 5 families. And then they also corroborated that they were rare. Out of the 23, 12 were rare or actually not seen by some fishermen. And then when we wanted to understand the shifting baseline, what we found is that most majority all fishers said that there was a substantial decline in body sizes and abundance of fish compared to their counterparts that were younger, that were between the intermediate fishers that were between 26 and 45, and those that were younger, 25 years. So what we concluded here is that fishermen in Kenya might be actually experiencing something that we call shifting baseline in ecology. And this is a phenomenon where current population level of species are thought to be the norm because the knowledge of the past has been lost. So we wanted to find also what were the drivers of change or decline of species. And strangely, fishermen say that climate change, 42% of fishermen, climate change was the major contributor to the species decline, as opposed to what we expected, overfishing, which there is only 6.1% say that overfishing was the cause. Yeah. And then, so after that, we tried to raise awareness. What we basically did, we now put all the species that we detected in posters and went around this study sites that we collected data, tried to discuss with fishermen and try to ask them what methods can be adopted to reduce or to try to restore the population of these species. The picture you see is one of the meetings that we did. So in conclusion, for developing countries, we can say that local knowledge represents an unaffordable way of determining the threat status of fish, and this method can be applied beyond just fish. It can be applied even in terrestrial environment. Then also including local knowledge in species at risk assessment might foster environmental stewardship, involving the resource user in conservation or knowledge about extinction assessment might help them change their behavior about exploitation of species. And then as I mentioned, we produce posters and discuss with fishermen methods to conserve the species. And then it was surprising that climate change was said is the major cause of species depletion, which was contradicting the actual fishery studies that say that overfishing is the main reason why species have declined. Then the groupers that I mentioned, their decline might have huge implication on ecological function because they maintain the ecological resilience in reefs. So I think these are the stakeholders that I worked with, fishermen, fisheries officers, and marine park managers. Thank you.
So our final presentation, we turn to Algidius Ichimbaki, University of Dar es Salaam. And we're going to be listening to hazardous impacts through coastal heritage actions in Tanzania. Thank you.
Yep, good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to go through my presentation, which is mitigating climate change hazardous impact through coastal actions in Tanzania. And I want to bring to your attention on the situation of climate change and coastal heritage in Africa. Some 2 years ago, there was a paper published in Nature which gives a summary of the coastal heritage and the way they are impacted by climate change. So this paper says one site among 100 sites is being impacted by climate change, and 56 out of 284, they are highly prone to loss because of the rising sea level and other climate change related impacts. And they are suggesting that by 2050, over 191 sites will really be jeopardized because of the climate change impact. And many of these are recorded as UNESCO World Heritage Site, which are important in terms of formulating identity, but also attracting tourists, which is critical. Now, when it comes to the coast of East Africa here, and basically in Tanzania, where we'll be focusing, there are quite a number of sites which are unique in terms of informing culture, forming what is popularly known as the Swahili Coast, covering the coast of about 3,000 kilometers from Mogadishu in Somalia all the way to Mozambique. And this was a center of what we call Swahili civilization, which indicated trading activities between the coast of East Africa and other parts of the Indian Ocean world, such as Middle East, Far East, and Southeast Asia. So we are talking about the testimonies that indicate the expansion of Swahili culture. We are talking about the testimonies that tell us about the Islamic religion, and so many things that we could learn on what was happening in Eastern Africa and probably beyond during the medieval period. I'll try to give a few examples here that we talk about. For instance, this is a 17th century Paris in Kilwa Kisiwani, which has got significant amount of archaeological materials around here, and they are being eroded. And here I focus on things like coins, beads, ceramics, and things like that. This was a gold center, again, during the 14th century. It should be 14th century here, sorry. And we have a lot of archaeological materials here, which indicates the trading activities which happened between the coast of Tanzania and other parts of the Indian Ocean. But there are also materials which indicate there was trading activities between the inland Africa and the coast of East Africa. Here we have the 16th century fort, which is highly eroded by rising sea level. And as you can see here, which means if there were any archaeological materials to tell us what happened in the past, they're all gone, wiped away by the rising sea level. We also have this mosque at the site of 16th century. It's already in the middle of the mangrove. And we can assume when this building was being done, there was no, I would say the sea level were very far away compared to what we see now, but it's already swallowed by the water. And then we go further to the 19th century. This is a slave warehouse in Bagamoyo, completely gone. And when we surveyed over here, there is a large part that was constructed in here and it has gone. So what does this mean if it happens within that range of less than 200 years? It means there will be significant impact affecting
the coastal heritage and the archaeology that we need. So probably I should finish up on this particular area with one example, which I have witnessed myself when I was doing my PhD research. I went to this particular area in 2014, and it was as complete as you see. And then 5 years later, almost a half was gone, and this is what you see. And then last year, it has completely gone, and this is what you see. Now you can imagine moving from here to here and to here within 10 years. There is much heritage that we have lost, which doesn't affect only this heritage, but it does also affect the coastal villages, the coastal populations, and therefore losing their, not only their tangible and intangible heritage, but the means of livelihood that they would use, as you see. So generally, I would say the coast of Tanzania and probably East Africa is really facing hazardous changes which really impact the lives and the archaeology of the coast of East Africa, which is dangerous in terms of losing what we would use to learn our past livelihoods and how we want to move forward. Now, is there anything that we think could be changing? In fact, we learn from some climate change modeling studies that the things will be much worse in the future. And I can give one example here, which indicates the changes and the rising of sea level, as you can see over here. I don't want to go back to go very much into this climate modeling, but I just want to show you what kind of interventions myself and colleagues have done on the ground. One of them has been planting mangrove trees, which really reduce the speed of the rising sea level, which impact cultural heritage, where more than 200 mangrove species have been planted on the sites to reduce climate change impact, but documenting some of the tangible and intangible heritage that are really impacted by climate change has been one of the critical issues we have done, at least to make sure that we have a digital copy of what is existing. And we are doing this in collaboration with the local communities, where we have developed a mobile application which is user-friendly, because many people on the ground, they have smartphone and they can easily take pictures and record. So this mobile application is very automatic, such that when one captures the image, it automatically captures the location and it can feed to the database to show what is happening, and then we can follow up to learn what is in there. So over 3,000 sites have been documented, sites and objects, they have been documented, and they tell us what is happening on the ground. Then using mass media has been another example to use, where national televisions, international televisions, and online television such as Tanzania Broadcasting Corporation and BBC are covering some of the activities that are happening and see what would be the best solution to tackle challenges. And then workshops, co-creation workshops with the school teachers who are really, at least within their day-to-day teaching, they could include issues of coastal heritage and what should be done to mitigate impact. But the local people on the ground, what we call the peasant intellectuals who are on the site, we are also working with them, as well as officials, so that we can influence policy. We have as well organized the exhibitions to tell the community on what it means and collect the ideas. So what you see here is a sample of the ideas that the people provide in terms of explaining what needs to be done, what is in there, what is important, and things like that. And these exhibitions have gone further to bring thousands and thousands of people, including students, pupils, experts, tourists, who are learning on what is happening and things like that. Now, I want to finish by bringing one critical issue here, that what I have said in here has been published on a few articles and newspapers. But when you look into all those, the number of downloads, the number of reads, and things like that, they are very minimal compared to what we would expect. So if somebody asks, how many people have you reached outside these people you are dealing with? The question cannot be too many, or cannot be 100, or cannot be 1,000. It's like we are circulating the information among the same people we are now. So as a strategy to try to change that narrative, we have converted some of the work we are doing into a popular language that can be consumed by the people, and this is music. So using music to capture the interest of the youth has been one of the critical idea or approach that we are using. And I will finish up my talk by giving you one of the songs that we have produced, which I think communicates the language we want to communicate much more better. And I encourage you to look at the message, because the song is in
Yeah, yeah. Moko majanga ya asili yanamiminika, ukame, joto na mafuriko, kisha misitu na waka, wanyama na kuisha. Tabia ya nchi kiukweli inatisha. Kwani unadhani hali vipi tete? Mabadiliko tabia nchi tutese. Dongo na kwenda vijiji viswekwe, yani hali tete. Pwani pweke, makazi ya kando yanaharibika, napigwa vimbunga na miamba kabisa. Mawimbi yakipiga magofu yanalika, ni nani mkunga wa kuwajibika? Na vipi zile ngome kongwe, mabaki na misikiti? Bwana chonde chonde, tuione kizazi hiki na vile vizazi vijavyo, wakawe wameliki, tuvitunze tukiwa tunavyo, ili kesho wakavirithi.
The climate is changing, year to year, and I see it's changing, decade to decade. I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling cold, the climate is changing. The tides are high, eroding shows, the sea is rising.
Majengo yaliyojengwa kwa matumbawe na chokaa, ona yanavyosombwa na bahari, maji yakijaa, kiungu na sarafu mpaka shanga walizovaa, tazama zinapotea pasipo hifadhi pata, na bado makazi tata, maji na takataka, na bado uvuvi tata, boda boda ndio biashara sasa. And now look at Karachi, Bombay to Manila, cities are risk, Istanbul to Lima, and Rio de Janeiro, the sea level rise. UK, SA, it affects worldwide. Tushiriki kwa pamoja kutunza vilivyobaki, tushapoteza vingi na muda si rafiki safi. Tumehifadhi kwa maandishi, walau tuone picha basi. Kwa mfano natamani kuona miji ilivyotamaraki, kama Bagamoyo, Songomnara, Zanzibar, mpaka Sanji ya Kati. Nipelekeni Mogadishu na Sofala, au Kilwa Kisiwani kwenye bandari safi. Makutani iwapi? Nionyesheni Gati. Urithi wetu ndo hazina pekee, na pekee yake iliyobaki. Tuulinde urithi wetu, tuutunze urithi wetu, utulinde urithi wetu, ututunze.
The climate is changing, year to year, and I see it's changing, decade to decade. I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling cold, the climate is changing. The tides are high, eroding shows, the sea is rising.
Tupande miti mikoko itusitiri, makazi ya samaki dili, tushapoteza vingi sio siri, pamoja we can if you will.
Teknolojia tulio nayo tuitumie, ile kidijitali urithi wetu tunziwe, na kale virekodiwe, ili vizazi vyetu kesho visimuliwe.
Climate change is the greatest risk facing us all. Join British Council initiatives, unite, work together, tackle climate change impacts, transform our world, preserve our past, ensure our future. Yeah.
So I end up by saying these strategies are really useful, because this song on YouTube has attracted more than 100K downloads, and there are a number of comments and views which you can download and have a look. And the kind of message we get, the number of reads we get is completely different from what we get from the publications that I and colleagues have made. very less. So there is really a need to think into a strategy to communicate the message such that it cuts across to the broad audience rather than keeping it to the academic. The money we get to do research comes from taxpayers, and we need to broaden the means to communicate what we research. Thank you very much.
So we have truly benefited from a multidisciplinary but also multimedia presentation. Thank you all. I'm going to welcome Natasha Mwila up to give us some discussant comments and get our discussion started.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay, I think you agree with me. What we have heard today has been really exciting, and it's been diverse. I mean, from weather and climate to assisted devices, and then also fish and heritage, to me speaks volume of the work that is actually going on within the African space. And basically for me, I think once I went through the work that the colleagues of mine are doing, I could see the innovations that are coming out in different ways, covering the heritage, which is very important in the African culture, as well as food systems and health. And one thing that struck me about the work is how to be able to document this information that is coming out of the rich work that is going on. And like Elgidis said, music could be one way of us getting to document this and capture the interest of a lot of people. And then bringing in Anna's work, which talked about digital aspects. That is a key thing for us because, I mean, the world has gone digital. So how best do we then use the innovations that we are coming up with so that we have the digital aspect to it? And then the indigenous knowledge systems that Levy brought out to me were key, and this is a discussion that has also been going on in some of the sessions that I have been involved in. And it is very important, like Levy said, because what you find is involving the people that have been in these communities for a long time is quite key because they hold a wealth of information which kind of guides how we are planning to move in the future. And as I went through this work, I think one thing that also kept coming to my mind is the issue of sustainability, because that is also the focus of our session today. And additionally, because I have also been involved in some key work in terms of development work within Southern Africa. Every time that we are talking about innovations that are coming from science and whichever space, sustainability is always coming up. How do you ensure that the work that you are doing ensures sustainability? And this is something that I would also want the speakers to think about as they maybe continue with the work that they have showed us today. A quick run through of just some key points on the particular work. So for Elkidi's work, I think for me, one of the things that I also felt would be good to include within your work is to also look at the agricultural livelihoods of the people that are in these coastal areas, the foods and the food systems that are there, because that also feeds within the heritage systems of these people, because it speaks to their health and nutrition. And then the forest and tree species, so the loss of biodiversity is also very important. And there is actually a project on integrated land management around the coastal areas, which is also covering Tanzania, which I am a part of, which is being supported by the European Union. So maybe some of your work would actually feed into this ongoing work. And then as we talk about sustainability, it would also be good to bring in how government is being involved within the process, because then they have the systems and structures in place to be able to ensure that this work actually goes on. I was very happy to see children in your pictures because I didn't watch the video already. But now that I also see the video, I'm very happy because also when we are talking about sustainability and futures, then children always have to be in the picture because they are the ones that will take this message along. And then I think in your recommendations would be good to see what kind of policy interventions need to be put in place, as well as not just for the government, but also what kind of national responses you would want to see from the work and the observations that you have made along the way. And then when it comes to Anna's work, I think your work is also quite relevant, especially that it's talking about early warning systems. I'm privileged to have done some work on early warning systems in Malawi and Uganda. So your work also spoke to me with also the real challenges that have been experienced in some of these countries that I have worked on. One of the key things has been the coordination among the government systems around early warning systems. So yes, you have the meteorology department, you have the Ministry of Agriculture and the different ministries that I think play out also within your country. But then one thing I think for me, which you would also need to communicate and bring in, is the aspect of how your app fits into already existing systems. And then does it also include other facets, for example, pest risk and disease risk, as you are talking about the drought early warning systems? There are projects, for example, one that is supported by FAO, which is called PRISE, Pest Response Information Services, as well as PIXA approach, which is being supported by the University of Reading, which also includes the satellite data, but includes other resources and tools which support the information that you provide on weather, but help now the farmers in the actual decision making. And one thing that I liked about your presentation was that you are now working with the extension officers, because in most cases what we found was the farmers are not yet ready to be able to use the digital apps, but using the system which is there, like the extension officers, as the first point of contact with the digital systems will help you also as you move along into other projects, so that they are then able to take this up and probably have a bit more ownership on this. And then Levy, I love the food fish aspect. This is also key work because then we are also talking about diversification of food systems and so on, and fish is playing a key role. And so if we have extinctions which are associated to climate change, I think for me really plays out that it's something that is a need and needs to be looked at. And I think for me, what really also struck me was how are the nutrition needs within the local systems where the fishing is actually going on. So kind of looking what are the alternatives of food that they're going into now, that they've seen that the fish is depleting. And then also when this data collection that you actually got involved in, when and how were you able to collect the data? Because I was also trying to think about when the fish are active and if it was varied across the day, just something that you probably would need to think about. And then it was good that you, like I mentioned, also engaged the fishermen who've been there for a bit of time. But there also what was important for me is how is this information being documented and how then is it being presented to the different stakeholders who are interested to do work in the fish sector, be it the development partners as well as the government systems. And then importantly is what do the locals think needs to be done to be able to reduce the decline? So what are the recommendations that are coming out from the people on the ground? Because they are the custodians of most of the information, actually. And we need to make sure that even as we bring in the science and a lot of things that we are working on, we are also kind of leveraging on the feedback that we are able to get from them. And then also recommendations then on restocking. I don't know if this is something that would also be feasible within your system. In Zambia, it is almost a similar situation. We have now restocking programs that are going on from different angles. And I know Malawi also is going through a similar kind of episode, because now in Malawi, if you go there, the fish is very small because it has been overfished, number one, but also due to the issues of climate change. And the plastic, for me, I think was also key. My son battled with fractures from his football interests. Early this year, he's had two, the hand and the foot fractures. And I think one of the things that struck me as I read your work was when initially I went there for his foot, I was told they did not have the device for him to be able to assist him to walk. And then, of course, we had to pay. We had to go to another hospital and pay some money for us to be able to get that support. So if we are able to get cost-effective devices, because now I know there are a lot of people who need this service and cannot just afford it, and where you are also taking care of the environment by removing the plastics, which are a huge nuisance within the environment, I think for me is quite an important step. And I think for me, for your work, was to bring out also now the business models. For example, when you are talking about doing a cost-benefit analysis, but bring out how you perceive that this would actually work for the African setup, because you mentioned it has been done in the UK, but it would be good to bring it to our case, and also bearing in mind that South Africa is a little bit different from many African countries. So putting that into perspective, but of course, initially you start with South Africa because that is your focus right now. And then I think you also now highlighted that this is now focused more on adults. But then I think another thing that I thought of as I read through your work was, since it's for a short time assistance, what happens when the person has recovered? Is there a way of returning these back to the health center so that other people are able to also pick and use them? And that could actually fit in within the business model that you would actually develop. So these, I think for me, were some key highlights that came out from the work, and I basically don't want to preempt, I think, the questions that would come to the participants. But I also wanted to take this moment that, as you can see, the work that is going on in Africa is very huge. And I would like to thank the Carnegie Corporation of New York for their support of this work, and many, because this is just from a few people that have presented this work. And in also bringing us here, the 8 fellows and 2 returning fellows, that includes myself, to the African Studies Association annual meeting, which we have this year. And this is an ongoing project between ASA and Carnegie to bring exceptional scholars from the African continent to the US to share their research with all of you at the annual meeting. And we know that the Carnegie Corporation is one of America's oldest grant-making institutions to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding, and we are grateful for their continued support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for your comments to get us kickstarted, and also for highlighting sort of your connection to Carnegie and how much work they're doing with so many fellows across the continent. It's a real deep commitment. And I know there's another panel, isn't there? Yes. When is that? Could we market the other panel?
Yes, we will have a second Carnegie panel in the same room at 1:30 after the lunch break. So we would love to have you back, and we have some more exciting papers to hear.
Yeah, so you can get a bite to eat and come back. But so I have a few questions and comments. I'm going to save mine for the panelists because I'd like to open it up to all of you that are here. Any comments, questions for the panelists about their research, ways that it sort of provoked new thoughts and ideas for any of you? Yes.
Okay, thank you. My question or comment is for Anna. Thank you for your presentation. I found it very interesting because not too long ago, I think about a month ago, I was doing participatory research in an area in Zimbabwe which was affected by Cyclone Idai. And one of the major things that we talked about was disaster risk management. And at the center of that is the issue of early warning systems. But what I noticed is that they have some cultural beliefs, about early warning systems. And, there's a sense in which, they believe that these cultural beliefs could even be more accurate than the scientific methods. So I'm curious to know if you ever, experienced this, and if you did, how you managed to incorporate it into your scientific project. Because most of the time we find that there is a clash between the science and people's beliefs. But they really believe that, if the government had taken into consideration some of the things that they were seeing a few weeks or a month before Cyclone Idai struck, maybe many people could have been saved. Thank you.
So, Anna, if you don't mind, I'm going to collect a few comments, and I think this good comment is also relevant for other people on the panel too. Other thoughts and ideas, comments, questions? Yes.
Yeah, I appreciated all the panelists. I learned something from all of you. Thank you very much. I'll do two quick questions. For Anna,
And maybe just if each person too can introduce so we get to know each other a little bit. I'm sorry I didn't ask for your name.
Okay, I'm Colleen Materiki from Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Mike Nelson from Monmouth College, and I teach an environmental politics class, and I have a lot of students that are interested in these kinds of projects too. And so the first question for Anna is just about the whether you're thinking about using this to also help lobby for better weather forecasting in general. Because I'm thinking, I have a student that's interested in Kenya about doing this because she thinks there needs to be more satellites. I know from northern Ghana, if it doesn't rain in 3 days, then what you just planted doesn't work. And so just thinking about, whether this could also be a platform for just better improved weather forecasting. And then the other question that I had was for Levy. And I definitely appreciate that climate change is affecting coral reefs. There's lots of evidence around that around the world. It seemed like, and maybe I was misinterpreting what you said, that the fishermen were saying that was one of the primary causes, and maybe it is, but you have to also live, unfortunately, with where we are at the moment, because it'll take a while if we get around to ever repairing the damage of climate change. How is that intersecting with acknowledgement of responsibility to manage those resources and thinking about maybe the new overfishing is not overfishing, but it's overfishing in the context of where we are right now with where the environment is? Those are the two questions.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Komi Begedua. I'm from Togo. I didn't follow the presentation. I came a little bit late, but I just want to make a comment and a question. I take the example of Togo, my country. What I've noticed is that when we're talking about climate change issues, making research, and finding results, when we go to the population themselves, it's like there's a gap between what science is finding very alarming, but with the reality that these people are facing. It's like something that comes once in a while. There is a flood once, and then it goes, they continue living their life, and maybe there is a lack of rain at a normal time, and they continue, but it's like the thing is not very striking to them as it is for decision makers or question is, how can we, what are things that need to be done by scientists so that the information will be at the same level for those who are the end users of the results that are being provided by science and the research? Thank you.
So I just want to quickly say that the video is fantastic.
Yes.
I don't know how you guys managed to do that, but it's such a wonderful thing to incorporate into your research.
Yeah. So I'm going to take off my chair hat and just, I want to also say, I think for all of these panels, the role of youth and how to engage youth and how thinking about information and how we share youth. So music, what about WhatsApp videos? And, or I've seen some Kenyans who are working on video games that are like sort of little tests, not tests, but they make it fun to sort of learn and think about new things that are around climate. And I'm wondering if anything is being done there. And then for some of the work, there's a conspicuous absence of the Kenyan government or the government regulatory power and for assistive devices. I'm wondering sort of what is the role of government as a political scientist and how are you working? I hear it sneaking in at different points, but I wonder how you're working with them. And then I was so impressed by how, so this gets to the comment before about the disconnect between how alarming it may seem to some and the everyday experience of others. For me, so much of your research is like, okay, what's the problem? And you're problem solving. So you're really focused on problem solving. But then I also wondered, what about justice and social movements and protests? Like, is there any connection to people sort of demanding change? In many other regions of the world, people articulate climate injustice. And I don't hear that as much from the African context. So I'll put my chair back. Other comments, and then we'll let any other comments, contributions? Yes.
I guess this is just more of a comment than a question, because your work is feels very relevant to me because I had a fall that should not have been a big deal, but I was misdiagnosed for a year, and because of that, the injuries piled up, and I had more injuries, and now I do use an assistive device sometimes as a result, and probably will for life, and so I think also besides the connection of access to these things is also like proper diagnoses, and I'm sure there are ways to like connect that within your work. Because like if you don't get you can't have the right supports if you don't have the right diagnosis.
So maybe if each of the panelists would like to take a couple of minutes, I know it's very difficult because you've heard a lot of things, but I don't know, maybe 3-ish minutes each. 1 or 2, he said he's very tired.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for the comments and questions. So to start with the cultural reefs, if I've encountered it, I think the trust is very important with these indigenous people. So because we have the meteorological agency, they give us information about, so the information is very general, like, okay, this region is going to experience this at so time. But when we went to the farmers, they don't really use that information because they really don't trust it. So that's how I went, like, let's co-design it with you people. Tell me the seasons. Because they had a complaint, 2020, they planted, everything was normal and all that, but it never rained. So they were expecting to have rain from March, and then when they reached up to April, it didn't rain. And then it went and rained June, where they're expecting to like have their crops and all that. So they too, I farmers know that, okay, we were experiencing this type of rainfall. It was this magnitude and all that. So it's for you to lead them, if I'm also going to answer the question, it's for you to lead them that this is the impact of climate change. So I had to go and do this trust and then co-design with them, but we didn't really face much because, okay, it's just about the rainfall and the drought. So it was not really superficial, like really cash flow. There was not much in our case. And if I also answer the question of weather forecast, so this is, yes, the drought, early warning system, but it also improved rain and general weather, because it does not only tell you if it's going to be dry, it's going to tell you it's also going to be very wet. So it's kind of a drought early warning system, but it tells you the whole picture of what rainfall is going to be. Yeah. If I'm working with the government, yes. So
You can pick and choose. You don't have to answer everything.
yeah. So yes, I'm working with the government because I say it's a bottom-up approach. So we started. So in Tanzania, I cannot go to the minister first before reaching the executive directors. The executive directors and the we call them Diwani. I don't know in English. Leaders will help me.
These are the division executive directors.
Yes, so I work with them. They are politicians. They are local politicians. So when I have, I showed all the meetings. So we have these local politicians. So we build trust first from the start, because it's so if it's picked up by one local division, one district, it's easy to translate it to another district. So now I'm not in the level to talk about if the minister of water and whatever has picked up my project or whatever, but I can say from the local politician and then the district, so there are politicians, and then there are those in the authority where they supervise everything. So I work with them. I make sure I do that to foster sustainability also. So thank you. I hope I have answered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So just adding on the role of government, and Reef, this will overlap with your question in terms of proper diagnosis and early diagnosis. It's two things, and then early intervention as well. We're privileged to be very strategically positioned now with a consultation with the National Health Insurance Office. Because it's a new system, there's a chance for change because everyone is very enthusiastic and policies have not been set in stone yet. The issue comes in terms of the procurement processes, because government has their own system and it's inflexible. So we need to figure out and navigate that, but we do have the chance to consult with them, and they do have a representative from our Physiotherapy Association actually sitting in the committee at the moment. Part of that in terms of adequate diagnosis is the lack of rehabilitation investment. So lack of investment into physiotherapy services, occupational therapy services, etc., speech and audiology for assistive devices for audiology, for example. But that comes to advocating for an increased budget allocation for rehabilitation. At the moment, the focus is acute care, acute care, acute care. We need emergency intervention. Trauma cases get the increased load, particularly in South Africa. We have a quadruple burden of disease, and trauma takes one of it, particularly blood trauma and violence. So the budget goes there, and we end up dealing with these complications of injuries that shouldn't have happened, as is your case. A year or two later, readmission, secondary diagnosis that could have been prevented the first time around. So we are there, but we have a long way to go, and we are being allowed the voice and the chance to express ourselves, which is a privilege. And the comment in terms of the beliefs and the scientific method and how do you integrate the two, I think as an African, we are very privileged that we are very conscious about spirituality and not shying away from it. If I take examples of patients that we've worked with who had a spinal cord injury or something, in their mind, it's not the assistive device that's making them walk, it's God that's helping them to walk. We're just there as a crutch in the literal and figurative sense. So I think having spent some time in Europe, a good amount of time, and now some time in the States, in the global north, I almost got the sense of, no, there's science and then there's spirituality and beliefs, but I almost feel like on the African continent, at least in the South African context, we're very flexible in terms of we can incorporate the two and we can respect that. So I think as an emerging scholar, it's almost changing that stereotype that when you come into academia, for example, you don't have to leave behind, even as an academic or researcher, your spirituality that comes with it. So yeah, thank you.
Maybe I will explain about the climate change causing fish depletion. Probably something that I didn't mention during the presentation because it will appear like contradictory to what I was presenting about. But if you look at the perception, when we look at the answers that the fishermen are giving us, that climate change was the main cause for fish decline, when we carefully analyze the answers, we found that this was something like, I don't know, plausible reliability, because they don't want it to go out that overfishing is the main cause of depletion, because then you might start the mechanism to reduce overfishing. So I took that as a plausible deniability, because 90% of the studies in Kenya show that overfishing is the main cause of decline in abundance. But what the government is doing now, because overfishing is a big issue, they're trying to introduce alternative livelihood among fishermen. We have seaweed farming going on in Kenya. We are also trying to work, because in Kenya the problem is that if you go with much force, it doesn't bear any fruit. You have to work together with the community. So what the government is currently doing, they have organized fishermen in terms of beach management units. So fishermen get to manage themselves in terms of the number of fishermen that go to fish, the gear they use, the number of boats that they use. Also just to mention about social justice, I don't know if this touches women, but what we are also finding in the sector in Kenya, in the marine sector, there are very few women that are involved in the sector, or not really involved, but they are not really I'm missing the one, but they are not mainstream into the marine activities. So what is happening currently is there are a number of assessments that are going on to try to see what women activities are going on, so that this can be brought mainstream. And also women are encouraged to take leadership roles in marine organization to try to mainstream women activities in marine. I think that's it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the comments and questions. And a number of issues are directed to me in general. So I will start with the one from the discussant, and I think you about the national responses and how the political arena does. Maybe I should have mentioned the first song I created came from the trauma kind of I had myself after one of the sites I showed was described on World Heritage UNESCO danger list. It remained there for almost 8 years. It received more than $7 million money, the most funded World Heritage site in Africa. Then after 7 years, this site was removed in the danger list. But when you go to the ground, the problems are more or less the same as what it was before it was on the danger list. So I published an article about that particular issue, analyzing the situation and things like that. And then I sent the article to all the heritage institutions directors in Tanzania, to UNESCO, to ICROM, and things like that. And nobody responded about that particular article, except one officer who said, we can't intervene the national issues because these are government-related things like that. These are corroborators. So because I am personally a music composer and music person. I said, why don't I change this article into a music and see how it goes? So I did the same, showing the pictures and images, bringing the intervention and things like that. And then I sent the same link music, which interprets the article into the same office that I did. Everyone responded and said, this is a fantastic work we should be doing. And actually, UNESCO played the song in one of their assembly in Paris. So that was a really big issue. And what does that tell?
So it's not just youth that engage, it's the
Yes,
policymakers.
exactly. They're being used. But what kind of message are we getting in here? I think the big message is that the means we communicate science needs to change. It needs to go beyond to the writing of books and papers and things like that that we produce, because these are not really accessible to the commoners. And even if they were accessible, the language we use is too technical for them to understand. Now, if I look into the population in Tanzania, how many people can read my research article? Probably very few. But these people are on wherever they go, be it in a bus, in a train, they are with their earphones listening to the music. So if I can capture that particular message much more simple, then it should go direct to the people. And probably we need to do that. It could be music, it could be film, it could be theater, it could be something that is artistic to capture the things. And then we need to use talents that we have. I am a music person myself. The lady you saw here is my student. Is also a very famous rapper. The younger lady you see is my own daughter. So we are trying to create something that can go beyond and things like that. And I really recommend, because we have published an article about that. It's called Musicalizing Heritage and Heritagizing Music, on how tangible and intangible heritage can promote each other and spread the news to the communities. Then I want to respond to the question about the indigenous knowledge systems. So one of the things that we are doing on the coast of Tanzania is to document the people's narratives and ideas and their views about climate change. So over the years, they have their knowledge, because fishing activity is very risky. They need to understand, will it be wind today? Is it going to occur and things like that? So they have their own knowledge of identifying what will the weather be, not climate, what will the weather be today. So they would listen to the birds sound. So they know if there is this kind of sound from the bird, don't go to fishing tomorrow because it will be too windy and we're going to get an accident. But there is also the way they would listen to the kind of the breeze of the wind from the sea. Then they can take note of that and they tell one another that tomorrow it shouldn't be a fishing day and things like that. But they also have things like presence or absence of a particular fish of a particular time. So if they know this particular fish has not been fished for 2 months, then next year is going to be terrible. We should expect things like that. And so these are critical knowledge warning systems that we need to capture and understand and bring them into practice and how we move forward. And last is from my colleague Togo, who is talking about that climate change doesn't really strike the people. It might be so in other instances, but in Tanzania it's completely different. People are very, very aware of what is happening, and they could give you some narratives which you can really be surprised on how they are concerned about that and the kind of initiative they are taking. So they would say, for instance, 2 years ago, we had a coconut tree there. And now this coconut tree is no longer there. The sea level has increased. There is something which needs to be, there is a need to do intervention. They would also tell you the amount of fish they used to fish in the past and what they are now, the type and things like that, and the interactions among the particular kind of fish and the big animals, marine animals and things like that. So there is really a desire on how we can co-create the systems that we bring the local knowledge together, the science together, and so that at the end we produce something which is tangible and relevant to the community and things like that. So just to finish up, I would say whether we like or we don't, there are a number of changes happening, not only in coastal areas but also in other landscapes that we may think And these changes do not affect the heritage of which I am a particular interest, but it also affects the livelihoods of the people. And therefore, unless we think of the alternatives that will cope up with such a particular issue, then we will not only lose the tangible and the intangible heritage that we need for the future, but we will also lose the livelihoods that people need to lose to make the livelihood. Thank you.
Powerful statements and great responses. Any last comments? I think we're almost out of time, but I want to make space if anyone has any last comments or questions.
Yeah, I think for me it's the interdisciplinarity of the research that is actually going on, that we should increase that more even as we go on, because I'm coming from a science background, plant breeding to be specific, but then I have delved a little bit more onto the social side, because then I have always wanted to understand, in particular for my work, what is affecting the consumption choices of the people that I'm dealing with. I'm developing varieties, but in essence, you develop so many varieties that at the end of the day, within my country, some of these foods are actually not being consumed. So it made me realize that we are doing something on our own as a science. I understand that what I'm working on, I'm improving a variety for specific traits, but is that what the people on the other side really want? So responding to the needs, putting these things into perspective, and then when you are on the ground, you actually realize it's much more complex. Like Pauline said, there's also aspects of culture and a lot of other things that are happening within the human systems, which you need to also put into perspective. And so for me, hearing a bit more about how music, for example, is being used to communicate such messages, even to politicians, is something that is huge, because that also relates to the science space and many other things that have been brought up today.
Well, thank you all for your fabulous research and sharing it with us. And thank you all for being here. I hope we'll continue the conversation, and maybe some of you will be able to come back at 1:30. But I hope you have a nice lunch.